You need to lead your heart, not follow.
God is telling you, like, I sent you this person to say this thing.
I have come to believe that that might be the most important mark of what makes a strong man. It's that ability to hear something that is hard and not just downplay it, and to actually think about it, really internalize it, really self-analyze it, and not let your ego be in the driver's seat. Shame is a good thing temporarily. It's a very, very, very good indicator of a healthy person. You want to find other people who are hungry in the same way as you, not perfect, still flawed. You could be, you guys could be at the very beginning of your growth journey on whatever thing, but guys are just serious about the same objectives. Any goal you have, find those other men and actually have the courage to say, hey, I see what you're doing. I want to be like that too. Can we work together? Can we help each other move forward? That's brotherhood.
A person who's only living in the continuous present is a very bitter and potentially a dangerous person.
I've been thoroughly impressed by Gen Z. But if I'm going to try and help these young men be good fathers and husbands one day, what do I need to do? I need to understand what it's like for them. That's your job, is to teach them.
You're listening to the Great Reassessment Podcast.
George Hayworth, thank you for being here.
Yeah, man, it's good to be here. Looking forward to this. Let's get to it.
Yeah. It's good to see you again. You know, I went on your podcast a few months ago, and it was just awesome being able to get introduced to your podcast first and foremost, because I've listened to several episodes since then, and what a great thing you're doing, man. That's really cool.
I appreciate that, man. It was great having you on, man. You were an awesome guest. I hate that your story has to be the way it is, but glad that we were able to help highlight it and hopefully spread some more awareness.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything works out for a reason. So I wanted to start this podcast off with asking you about Charlie Kirk. You know, the news cycle moves so fast, you know, and one day you have one story, another day you have another. The tragedy of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, it's like, it's still really out there. People are still really affected by this. I think we're going to be talking about it for many more months, if not years to come. But that was only a few weeks ago. And how did that affect you personally? And what were your initial reactions to the whole thing? And like, how did you process it?
Initially, obviously, I was shocked, kind of felt a wide range of emotions. You know, everything from anger, you know, about the injustice of it all, to just sorrow, kind of a deep sadness, you know, wow, this is our country. My immediate thought, and I'm not necessarily saying they are the same, but it struck me as this is how much people must have felt when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, right? I would imagine that the same level of kind of just cellular level visceral reaction to something like this, that must have been the mood at the time, kind of felt that way, at least internally. And my thoughts were, as a husband and father too, you know, what is my responsibility now? How do I respond to this? How do I make sure that, you know, despite the tragedy of it, you know, I can do the right thing for my family and my local community. So that was kind of my initial reaction. Hopefully that's what you're looking for. I'm sure we've got more to discuss there, but it's definitely evolved. I know it's only been a few weeks, but I tried to start by being very emotionally regulated and not allowing myself to, in any one direction, just react, right? I speak about this constantly. It's something that I've been learning heavily in the last 2 years and really growing in individually. And that's to respond to situations, not to react. And so to respond, you have to first recognize your own emotion, whatever's happening inside you, gain composure over that, and you'll still feel it. It doesn't mean to, you know, push it away, but then choose a response to the situation instead of like letting your anger or sorrow or fear or whatever react for you. And so that's what I really tried to do in this situation, because I mean, quite frankly, it's maybe the biggest test in my recent memory of where I would need to practice that discipline. And so that's where really for the first couple of days, I really tried to focus on that first and foremost, to make sure that whatever my actions were, you know, what I said publicly or privately, any of those kinds of things, that they were measured through what I actually believe or want to hold myself to, as opposed to just a gut reaction or, you know, some news headline or something.
Yeah. I think we all sort of need that right now. And I think you touch on some leadership insights that are really helpful. And so you were in the Army, and you still are in the military. Field artillery officer, I was reading on your bio. And yeah, talk to me about that a little bit. Like, what was the military for you? Like, why did you join? And has the journey been like, did it match your expectations? And yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, you know, 9/11 happened when I was in 7th grade. I vividly remember everything about that day because, like you, I was on the West Coast at the time, so it was we hadn't even gotten to school yet when it happened, and so from that day forward, I knew I would do something in the military. I think a lot of people felt that way during that time. I joined primarily because I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to do something bigger than myself. I believed in it. I was called to it for those idealistic reasons. But I've spoken about this pretty heavily too. I think a big piece of it was me looking for validation. I had a lot of insecurities, a lot of things I was looking to maybe heal within myself that the Army would never be able to do that, right? That's a personal journey that I was looking for an external thing to provide me. But the bulk of it was pure intentions. And then I think maybe some of it was insecure teenager looking to validate himself as a man. But aside from my own insecurities or problems, it was overall a very positive experience for me. I commissioned as a field artillery officer. For those who don't know, that's the big cannons. You shoot indirect fire. It's not the infantry. So we support the infantry so that they can move and you cover them with fires and stuff. So pretty complex job in terms of, coordination, and you have to get it right because if you get it wrong, it's fatal. So very high pressure. Taught me a lot of attention to detail, deployed really rapidly after kind of getting my initial schooling out of the way, showed up to the 101st Airborne Division and basically deployed within a couple months to Afghanistan. And that was a really good experience for me, which I know may sound strange to people, but I learned so much about not just the Army and not just how to be a good, soldier in combat, but just about life in general from the men I deployed with. I was on a pretty intimate team of 14 people. And, we were advising Afghan police. We were kind of like a non-standard team structure for a Army deployment. So I got to be exposed to a lot and get to really work as not just an officer, but also as like a lower enlisted soldier. I got to see both sides of the equation and had to do the jobs of both sides of the equation. And as a young man, that's a really defining, forging moment into manhood. And so I learned a lot. But again, I still had all those same problems that I had never really grown out of from my personal life. So those kind of reared their head later in life, but military specifically, very positive for me. It provided a lot of structure, a lot of very valuable lessons that now that I have grown as an individual, especially on kind of the personal struggles I've had over life, those lessons have now been even more amplified because I can actually maximize them. I'm not, I don't have these anchors holding me back anymore. So I've been able to carry those things forward and into a professional sense. Part-time now in the National Guard. I actually switched over to engineer officer. And, in my professional life now, I coach and consult businesses and individuals. And a lot of those lessons are what I learned from the military and have experience in the civilian sector too. Did almost a decade in corporate America. So kind of comparing and contrasting what the Army said versus what, big corporations typically say. It's pretty safe to say there's a wide gap in leadership capability. There's a lot of people with leadership titles, but maybe not the skill sets or the training on how to actually do the action of leadership. And so that's become a real passion for me, is to help leaders at every level understand what actual leadership really is. And then that's kind of the other half of my business, is helping men understand what that looks like in your own home. And so that's why, asking about Charlie Kirk first, that's really the culmination of a lot of really hard lessons learned for me over years and years of experience now, being able to truly regulate my emotions, respond, logically and rationally, even to a very visceral event, and make sure that I'm leading through the situation and not just being another passenger on the train, And so I thought immediately, I need to talk to my wife about this. We need to be on the same page about this, how we talk to our daughter about this and those kinds of things. So there were leadership actions I needed to take, even though I was feeling whatever I was feeling.
Yeah. Quick question before I ask you about something else you said.
Mhm.
Did you commission through one of the academies, or did you go to like officer training school?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Oregon. I had an ROTC scholarship. And I believe, just at the time, I don't know what it is now, but I believe like 80% of all officers go to ROTC. So it's actually a very small subset that are prior enlisted and then do OCS. And then I think it's only about 10% that go to the service academies. So don't quote me on that hard fact, but it's somewhere around those numbers. So the bulk of officers in the military just go to a regular college. They do ROTC. So you're kind of like, you're a regular student, plus you have some extra classes you have to take for whatever your branch is. And then you commission and go to your actual like military training schools when you're full-time after that.
That sounds right. When I was in the Air Force, all the officers that I spoke to, I think that a lot of them were going through ROTC. I very rarely met somebody who went to the academy. And if you wanted to
Well, it's
be
probably even, I mean, the Air Force is pretty small. I think, in general, right? Compared to the
Yeah,
Army. So,
size-wise compared to the Army at
yeah, I
least.
don't even know. It may even be more selective for the Air Force just because there's less jobs available. I'm not exactly sure, but
Yeah. I remember I applied to go to officer training school, and it was just one time I was like, "I'm gonna just try it once, and if I get it, I think I'll stay in, but if I don't, I think I'm gonna get out." And, it was a really low selection rate that year. It was like
Mhm.
2019, and it was like one it was anyways, I won't go off on that tangent, but,
Yeah.
um, were you a person that's, prior to all this, somebody who went more based off emotion rather than, um, like you were saying, like responding, and like, what was that transition like? Did you feel it happening, or did it, because a lot of times a journey, we don't really pause to look back
Mhm.
very often until, maybe a long jump of a few years. But did you recognize that about yourself before you even made that change to sort of, s- you know, stabilize your emotions, respond, not react? Tell me about that transition.
So I was always very, very passionate, very animated. In many ways, that makes me very good at a lot of what I do. Especially in the military too, right? I'm pretty charismatic and that kind of thing, but I definitely would let my emotions get the best of me, right? I would, especially anger or things like that. I would wear my heart on my sleeve a lot of the time. That can be good in certain situations, but it's certainly a weakness. I would say, if you had to kind of put them on the scales, I think it's more of a weakness than an advantage. And so what I've learned to do, just kind of fast forwarding, is understanding like when it's the right time to actually let things out a little bit more. Because the flip side of this coin, to kind of just foreshadow here, is I think a lot of men confuse this of stoicism means you're a robot and that you just stifle all emotion, and that's not true either, because that actually just leads to a blow up at some point and is very damaging to you internally, right, on a kind of spiritual, emotional level. So that's also not a solution. But there are moments where we should let our emotions really flow through. Maybe it's a very heartfelt moment with people you care about, or maybe it's a very fun thing. It's not just like anger or sadness, right? So it's, anyway, back to kind of where I was. I used to lie to myself, right? I just wove a great story about, nah, man, I'm just fired up. They just don't understand me. That's just who I am. I'm just passionate. People just need to get over that. If you have to say anything about that, about yourself in kind of those terms, it's probably an indicator that you're covering something up, right? This should be a aha moment, look in the mirror type of thing. And I just kind of sold myself my own story and kept running with it, right? So instead of recognizing it and growing it, I kind of just played it down as, now that, they just need to get over it. Uh, Really, I think for me, where I started to recognize pretty clearly that I need to make some serious steps here was actually us starting our podcast. That was over 3 years ago now, and just talking to people like yourself, many of whom are experts in various fields, some of them on, parenting or marriage and those kinds of arenas of life. I recognized very quickly, just through self-awareness, that, yeah, that thing they just said, like, I need to go reflect on that. And I found that to be a superpower, the ability to analyze yourself and kind of take that feedback that stings and then wrestle with, what do I need to do to improve that? For me, one of the earliest episodes we did was covering the book called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters by Meg Meeker. And I'd very intentionally wanted to be a very good father. I'd put tons of energy into leading well as a father and doing all the things I could, right, to be the best that I could be. And I read that book and I was like, oof, man, I've got a lot of work to do. Kind of sucked in the moment, but since then, that really accelerated my journey of like, hey, no more excuses, no more lies. I need to, if I hear something that stings a little bit, ask myself, why does that hurt, right? Why did that feel like a personal attack, instead of reacting to it? And so growing up, my background was very emotionally charged. Parents divorced when I was a teenager, lots of manipulation going on, a lot of emotional kind of manipulation and struggles in that area. And that carried through adult life, obviously, because I never really solved the issue there. And so in some ways that made me really good and amplified some of my best traits, but it also amplified some of my worst traits. And so look at my marriage, for example. I would take anytime I felt similar to how I did years in the past, I would react at my wife in the same way. And so I was essentially just constantly doing battle with her, when in reality, it could have nothing to do with me, and I was just reacting to the situation instead of responding. So what that looks like today is, now that I've been able to recognize, my wife may say something that seems either a little hurtful, or it seems very uncharacteristic for whatever the issue is, right? It's a very amplified response to whatever the issue may be. Instead of getting reactionary myself and kind of doubling down, assuming that that was a personal attack, I'll ask something like, hey, honey, are you stressed right now? Can you help me understand what's going on? And not to be patronizing, but more of, I genuinely want to understand why you're so dysregulated right now. Let's come to an understanding and maybe I can help you with this. That is for me maybe the most visceral kind of like before and after type of examples, because old George just would have gone into full fight or flight mode there, which would have been fight. And, that causes loads of problems in a marriage. That erodes all kinds of emotional safety and trust. And if that doesn't exist in your marriage, everything else is going to struggle as well. So hopefully that answered it fully. I think men really need to, regardless of your background, regardless of what your career is, if you're married or not, even if you're single, this is the best time to start mastering genuine stoicism, which is thing happens, you feel a certain way. Why do I feel that way? How do I actually need to respond? It's a little bit of an equation there, because most of us, what we do, if we haven't mastered this yet, is thing happens and we just fire back with whatever comes to mind, right? Whatever feels right. And so you need to lead your heart, not follow it, right? There's a massive difference here. And detaching yourself from maybe the intensity of any emotion, it could be happiness, joy, sorrow, anxiety, whatever, and recognizing like, okay, well, why? Then responding has been maybe the most important thing I've done in my life in the past couple of years. And there's no magic solution for it, because every one of us is different. We've got different strengths and weaknesses. You have different backgrounds. So you truly have to do this journey for yourself. And I'll close with like the most vivid wake up moment of like, hey, I really have to put more effort into this. It was me sitting across the table from Nick Lavery, interviewing him on our podcast. And this is like 18, 19 months ago now. And he was talking about how special operations, evaluations, they consider emotional regulation to be essentially the top skill. Like a guy could have all the, he could be the best shot, the fastest, the strongest, the most tactically sound and all that kind of stuff. But if he lacks emotional regulation, they don't trust him. And they're not going to put him in positions of leadership, because he'll let his, emotional reactionary behaviors lead instead of actual leadership. And in the moment, as he's saying this, he had no idea that I was, kind of internally feeling like, oh man, I had a huge argument with my wife just a few weeks before. It was Christmas night. I ruined Christmas because I let my anger be in charge. And in that moment, he was saying these words. It's like it pierced straight to my heart, and I recognized, hey man, you got a long way to go still, right? You may have told yourself you've improved in this whole stoicism thing, but absolutely not. You need to really think about this emotional regulation term and what that means for George in the context of George's life, and really put effort into that. And so from that moment forward, I've, on a pretty much consistent daily basis, thought about how do I improve in this skill. So I know it was a little bit long-winded, but it's this has been the most important thing that has paid dividends in all facets of my life, in my marriage, as a father, in my business, with friendships, all of it. If you essentially, if you can't control your emotions, they control you. And so you're not in control of anything.
Man, thanks for sharing that. The experience you had with Nick Lavery, those moments are rare, but they're such a blessing too.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like you feel like he's speaking to your soul almost.
Oh yeah.
And to have something that's like so directly, it's so applicable to something that you're like, I've had those moments before, and they're sort of scary almost. Like it's like you feel so accountable, even though this person like has no idea that they're literally, they found the locus of exactly what you're trying to improve upon. And it's kind of eerie a little bit, but those are huge growth moments, because like, exactly, it's like God is telling you, like, I sent you this person to say this thing. Like
That, yeah.
you think it's going to
That's
share it with
exactly
the
what
whole
it was.
podcast, but like this was for you, the host, not for the audience. And like
Yeah,
those little
maybe.
moments are beautiful.
Well, and just quickly to expand upon this, I have come to believe that might be the most important mark of what makes a strong man, right? What makes a really good, great man that's a cut above the rest is exactly what you just described. It's that ability to hear something that is hard and not just downplay it, and to actually think about it, really internalize it, really self-analyze it, and not let your ego be in the driver's seat. Because what I would have used to do would have immediately been to tell myself a little lie in that moment, like, yeah, what he said is exactly right. I don't struggle with that, right? I would have glossed over the fact that, hey, bro, 2 weeks ago you failed at this big time. Wake up call, right? So the other piece here too is like we as a society have drifted away from the word shame, right? Like we shame is like the dirtiest word in the world, right? Like don't shame me, you just accept me, accept everything. Like shame is a good thing temporarily. It's a very, very, very good indicator of a healthy person. If I would have had no shame internally in response to that very gripping statement that Nick had made, then that would have been proof that I was not growing, that I was deceiving myself, that I'm not a good person, right? I'm willing to lie to myself and continue to hurt others instead of taking ownership over my flaws. Shame is the proof that you are genuinely making effort towards growth. So, or maybe like feeling inadequate or whatever, right? Any kind of shame-like feeling initially is proof that you are actually growing. Because the old you would have just stayed asleep to whatever the problem was, and you would have pushed dirt over it and pretended it's not a problem and drove on like nothing happened. And that's what little boys do. That's not what men do. And I was emotionally still pretty crippled. I was very immature emotionally. And so I've been really amplifying in that area because it is so important. But to those listening, maybe we're talking about something that stings a little. Good. If it stings, that's proof that you are practicing self-awareness and you now have the opportunity to actually improve it. And so we don't want to stay in the point of shame. We need to actually move out of that and build confidence and actually, gain ground on that area. But that indicator initially is not a problem. That's a good sign that you're actually listening, you're actually desiring to make growth. And so it's been part of this experience for me too, is recognizing that I don't need to beat myself up or try and downplay an initial feeling like that. It's just an indicator to me that like, ooh, hey, this might be a growth area, or this is something you should maybe consider deeper. Slowing myself down kind of internally has allowed for a lot of benefit to come emotionally, spiritually, financially, like just across the board in my life. Things have gotten a lot better when I've learned how to wrestle with that and not push it away.
Yeah, I really like what you said about shame. I completely agree. I think our culture has sort of shunned that word away. A lot of words. Our culture is sort of, you could describe our culture as saying, it's like, whatever makes us uncomfortable, we don't have to do it. And shame is like a signal to change. Maybe you're feeling that way because like there's a deep innate part of your soul that knows something is out of tune.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to redirect people away from poor decision making. We don't really have a culture of shame in our society anymore. And decades ago there was, and people acted, I think, a little better. Maybe I know it might not reflect a real change on the inside of a person, but what we're really looking for is some order. And I think that can help bring order to a society, because if everybody's just off going, doing whatever they think is best, things fall apart really quickly. Humility is kind of the other word that I'm thinking of when you're talking. The ability to take criticism and not get defensive the instant somebody starts offering a critique. And I think it really takes humility to listen and not interrupt somebody when they're offering a critique. It's like the hardest thing in the world because we want to defend ourselves. And this is a topic that's come up in conversation with people I've been having this conversation with people a lot lately, this being able to take criticism well. And what do you think, how do you think you can grow in your ability to accept criticism?
It's a very complicated question in my opinion, because this is a similar question I get frequently. I both either in my own business or kind of assisting in other areas where, there's growth communities and things of that nature. I'll get asked often very similar questions about how do I build my patience, or how do I build my resilience, or how do I become more humble? In my opinion, those are products. So humility or resilience or patience, those kinds of things, those are the byproduct of a lot of deep inner work. that comes back to very base level character things that many of us have missed because our society's pretty upside down, right? Like we talked about shame as one example. People are basically bad. We want to pretend that we're these higher evolved beings that are so enlightened nowadays. It's like, no, if you could get away without getting in trouble, people would do a lot of things, and they may not want to admit that, but that's the reality of the situation. We're not perfectly great people just inherently. So there has to be some negative consequence for bad behaviors, as just one very raw example there. As it relates to humility, for me, I'll just speak from my own personal experience and then maybe equate it a little bit broadly from there. The reason I struggled with humility wasn't because I necessarily was a prideful person. It was insecurity. It was fear-based, right? I was afraid of being found out. I was afraid of being exposed as not enough or a fraud or whatever, right? Whatever the story was inside my head. So I would push back on maybe something where it should have been a moment for humility to recognize and accept a lesson. And I would essentially push back or argue or try and, prove them wrong or something of that nature. It was all fear driven. It was from a position of inadequacy and fear and doubt and self-loathing. And the only way to ever gain the ability to be humble was to actually heal the wounds of little George, right? So I know this is sounding very like woo-woo and kind of, therapeutic type words here, but for many of us, that is the case. Something has happened to us, or many things have happened to us at some point in our life that we've basically just pretended didn't. And if you don't honor the past and recognize what has happened for why you struggle in the way you do, there's no way you can actually solve it. So I'm not saying be a victim. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But I had to honestly recognize, hey, George, this, and this happened in your past, right? Your parents were the way they were. You dealt with these emotional manipulation things. You struggle with emotional regulation and not feeling attacked all the time because of this, and this. Okay, that's your trigger. Here's how you actually need to respond now. And so what that looked like was in my initial gut reaction of, oh, well, it feels like an attack, must do this. I had to stop, pause, and this is one of those moments. And so it doesn't just happen overnight either, right? So, I'd get it right maybe 1 out of every 100, and then it'd be every out of 50, and then out of 20, and so on. You will gradually progress. It's like working out, like with your muscles. Your biceps get bigger after doing enough curls. It's the same kind of thing here. It's just like an emotional muscle. I think humility is very much one of those byproducts where when you've kind of level set internally, your ability to then have patience or understanding or humility or resilience is a result of those inner works. So generally for men, where this looks is, my 4-pillar analogy here of king, warrior, mentor, and lover. And, king is essentially leadership. Warrior is basically protecting the innocent, standing up for your ideals. Mentor is having the heart to train and mentor others. And then the lover pillar is really it's pretty obvious there. That's things like emotional regulation, empathy, compassion, all 4 of those working together. When you build those pillars first, you naturally become more humble. You naturally become more patient. You naturally become more resilient because those are kind of the rewards of doing the inner work. So I hope that analogy kind of answers your question fully, but I don't think there's a way to just sit and be like, all right, this week I'm going to grow my humility muscle. It's like, well, it's actually just the result of a lot of little things, and then you'll become more humble. So hopefully
it's
that
like
sheds some light on it.
No, it definitely does. I like what you said. It's a product, not necessarily. I think there's virtues that you can cultivate deliberately, and you can learn a lot by reading, studying the lives of great men, and you can try to emulate their lives. But the secret ingredient to becoming, I think, aspiring to be a great man yourself is the experience. If you sat in your basement and you read every biography on George Washington and the great leaders, you might have a lot of head knowledge, but that deep inner work hasn't happened to you. And so I think things have to happen to you so that a trait like humility can be cultivated in a person. And I think a lot of times for some of the great men of history that we read about, it comes through suffering. And because suffering sort of it gives you a heart of flesh and it kills pride, essentially. And I think anytime I think I've walked away with more humility, it usually is always from a really tough experience that I would never have chosen for myself. But, kind of looking back, I'm like, man, that was actually a really a growth moment for me, because it killed some pride, and it gave me more compassion for other people, having walked through this. And but yeah, I like that what you said, it's a product. And yeah, that's really cool. Who are the people that are kind of like running around in your head as motivation? Is there anybody specific?
You mean like people I look up to?
Yeah, people you look up to that inspire what you do on a daily basis.
Great question. And let me first offer a framework for especially all the guys listening. I think this is one of the biggest areas in which our modern society has failed men. We try to be these lone wolves. We try and just, right? We talked a lot about what you can do to grow yourself. The risk here is you're going to go and try and do it on your own. I assure you, you will fail. That's basically my whole life story. Is I tried to just willpower myself to be better. Basically kind of acted like I didn't need anyone else. The framework is this. You need mentors, peers, and proteges, especially as a man. You need all three. The mentors are the ones who are going to help you expand your beliefs about yourself, what is possible. They are that motivation. They're the inspiration. The peer group is probably the hardest one for modern men to cultivate. It's the most lacking situation for men today because, we can log onto the internet and see all these inspirational people. It's really hard to admit to people in the same season of life as you, like, hey, man, I'm struggling with this. Can we help each other? That requires some courage. It requires courageous transparency. So that's actually an area where a lot of people are missing. That's actually the most powerful piece of the equation once you have the other two in place. The real transformation happens in that peer group, which I'll come back to to answer on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
And then proteges, it forces you to continue to accelerate your own growth so that you can still be of service to those kind of further behind you in the path and drawing them forward. And that also, again, strengthens your ability to empathize, have compassion, things like that, right? It makes you a more complete man when you have to slow yourself down, meet someone where they are in their journey, and then be of service to them in that moment, right? It inherently requires you to think of someone more than yourself. So fathers, you are mentors. Your proteges are your children, first and foremost, but then you can also look outwardly, professional settings, things of that nature. For me personally, Nick Lavery was obviously one of those people that was very near the top where I was like, okay, this guy, the fruit of his life, not necessarily his military achievements, but the character that I see from him and a sense from him, I want more of that. I want to be more like that. Why am I not that way? This is kind of my thought process. I've been very fortunate to have several other men like him. Nick Alfano is one. Another one is named David Waldy. They're all really great men in different aspects of life that I recognize, hey, they are way ahead of me in these areas. And I want to try to be more like that. How can I cover that gap, right? And then, I've had the privilege of working with them and speaking with them pretty consistently. And those are just a few names. That the list of men that I've looked up to who are, outstanding is too many to name right now on this podcast. But coming back to the peer group, so when you kind of set your sights on like, oh, that's a really motivating, inspiring person, I want to be like him. He seems to just have all these characteristics that I want to emulate. Okay. If you can't get direct access to that person to directly mentor you, the next step down is that peer group. You want to find other people who are hungry in the same way as you, not perfect, still flawed. You guys could be at the very beginning of your growth journey on whatever thing, but guys who are just serious about the same objectives, right? And you may have slightly different paths in life, but you're aligned in like, I want to build more humility, or maybe I want to go get more fit. The best way to go get more fit, find a couple fit dudes and be like, hey, bros, will you help me out? Can I hang out with you? Can you teach me how to lift like you? They're probably going to say yes, and then you're all going to get jacked together, right? So that's a very basic example, but it could be anything, any goal you have. Find those other men and actually have the courage to say, hey, I see what you're doing. I want to be like that too. Can we work together? Can we help each other moving forward? That's brotherhood, right? It's not just in the military. It's not just in some, sports team or whatever. That should be a daily thing that we do very consistently, especially as husbands and fathers, right? We get coaches and training programs and guidance on every facet of life for business, school, sports, military, whatever. And then we basically just assume we're going to be great husbands and fathers without any training or mentorship. It's insane. So the peer group is actually the most critical piece of that equation. And that's where they may not be names, if I said them right now, you would recognize, right? They're not necessarily famous people, but they have been the most influential people. And I'll just call one out, Brandon Blinson, my co-host, and he also instructs in our program for men with me. For me, he has been maybe the most important person because we are in the same season. We are close friends. and he knows my flaws to a very intimate level. And so when I can honestly admit, hey man, I don't know what to do in this situation, or I need guidance or whatever, he is fully invested in me winning. And he knows me to that level that he can give me that thing I need in that moment. Mm, And we're both shooting towards that ideal. So that is the formula for success. And I think a lot of this applies to women too. It's not purely masculine, but there is something about, as men, we are really designed to have that group, that pack, that really forces you to become more than yourself. If you are living in a comfortable space where it's just you, me, myself, and I trying to beat your own goals, you will have some success, but at some point, your limitations, because you're just one guy, is going to lock you into a position that you'll never break out of. And when you surround yourself with those other guys, they may just ask a simple question like, have you ever considered this? And it's like your whole world will expand. So men need that. We are designed to kind of have that honing, iron sharpens iron type of process in our life. And if you are lacking that right now, I would recommend you seek that out aggressively, because any growth you're desiring is just going to ramp up that much faster when you actually get yourself a tribe.
Yeah, man, there's a lot you said there that I think is really valuable. So the first thing, the thing that you said about having a mentor, peers, and a protege, you just sort of united something I've been meditating on a lot lately. And that's this idea of, because with that, you're uniting the past, present, and the future, right? Our culture is so defined by living in a continuous present. And, I was a former teacher, and I saw just how the public school systems are sort of designed to, segregate everybody based on age. And, kids are on their phones all day, and, they're communicating with their peer group, right? And we've sort of cultivated a society where teenagers and young people don't like old people. So they're never gleaning off of their wisdom. And they actually don't like spending a lot of time with children. So we're just all living in this continuous present. And I think those are really, a person who's only living in the continuous present is a very bitter and potentially a dangerous person, because they don't have a stake in the future. And they might not even be able to recognize it, but they're not like as grounded in what life is supposed to be all about. And so how you do that sort of practically, I like what you said, having mentors, a strong peer group, and a protege, actively trying to pass down something and to be of service to other people, thinking of somebody more highly than yourself. And so that sort of unites those two concepts for me.
Well, just real quickly too, on kind of that idea there. I think, yeah, you're right. That's one of our biggest shortfalls as a modern society, is this whole generational divide. Oh, kids these days or whatever, and then kids thinking, oh, they're old fogies or whatever. Like, I don't know how that became the norm, but there's so much to learn from each other. So a very personal example. I just recently felt convicted of I need to volunteer more within our church. I've started working with the high school group. And so I'm kind of like a small group leader for the junior boys, right? So they're 15, 16, 17, somewhere in there. I've been thoroughly impressed by Gen Z. Maybe it's just this group. This is a small sample size, but a lot of the things I hear on Twitter or whatever, right? All these, the younger kids, this or that, they're just stuck on their phones and everything. I've actually seen quite the opposite. They've been very supportive of each other. They're not afraid to say what they believe in. I've been pretty impressed, to just put it bluntly. I don't think I was as emotionally mature as they are when I was their age. So just as a very small sample size here, how much more could we benefit as a society if we were having those cross conversations and acknowledging the differences and experiences and those types of things, but then figuring out how we actually help each other with those. So, I don't pretend to know all the things they're saying or the context of their jokes or whatever, but seeking to understand them. And, just a very raw example here. Could you imagine dating as a teen, could you imagine being maybe 20 years old and trying to find a wife right now in today's world? To me, that seems insane. Like, it's just so different. But if I'm going to try and help these young men be good fathers and husbands one day, what do I need to do? I need to understand what it's like for them. I can't just go, oh, well, back in my day, right? How arrogant, how selfish, right? you got to the top first and then you're going to kick the ladder out behind you. Like, come on, guys. And I saw this in the military too. When I was a commander, I had some NCOs complain to me, well, like, you just don't understand, sir. Soldiers today, they're just so soft and this, and this. And I said, BS. Why are you here then? Your one job is to train them. So if you really are that much better, then teach them. That's your job, is to teach them. So we're going to create a condition for them to try and fail and learn from it, and we'll pick back up and do it again. And by the way, we were talking about land navigation. They were afraid of sending them out on their own to do land navigation. And I was like, guys, it's a box. We can literally like patrol the perimeter with Humvees. And like if someone gets that lost, we'll go find them. Like there are ways to do this safely. They're not going to die. You got to kick them out of the nest a little bit too, right?
Yeah.
So this generational divide is a serious problem. And if you're that type of person who's like, oh, well, Gen Z, they dress stupid or whatever. Like if you're looking down on the previous generation, I remember as a millennial, like we had all the labels thrown on us as millennials. Like we're lazy, we're self-entitled, blah, blah, blah. And are some of those things true? Probably, right? There's been a lot of that. Who taught us? Who taught us to be that way? Our parents generation. So like, take a hard look in the mirror. What are you doing to actually fix the problem instead of just blaming the next generation? When you can do that and have some humility again, you have to recognize, all right, what are their limitations? What do they actually see the world in? How can I connect with them and maybe teach them an example? And so like the way I do that often, not just with the younger generations, but even my clients, is you essentially just ask, hey, would you like some help with that? Or may I offer a perspective for you? And if they say yes, then let them have it. And if they say no, then let them figure it out. It's not your job to go be their savior, but at least extend the olive branch and then try and gain shared understanding and sharing lessons. And you'll be surprised. You might learn from your protege some things that you weren't expecting.
Yeah. Man, what a sweet thing for those young boys that you're volunteering with. That's really cool. I think you're the type of guy that, I mean, we should all be looking for those opportunities, but I bet those kids love having you. I also am incredibly optimistic about Gen Z. I wasn't like 5 years ago, but after working as a high school teacher, seeing the best and seeing the problems as well, I have a good, I think, gauge on both of those things. Yeah, like they stand up for things that mean a lot to them. Just me going through my teaching experience, I got to see that firsthand. It's like these kids stood up for me. They volunteered to go, to the school board meeting and say things and speak out. And like, they definitely need some of the wisdom that comes from, the generations before them. But I think I think they're waking up to it. I really do. I'm really optimistic. And when millennials and Gen Z and Gen X in there, like I think it's going to be good. I really do. When this next generation is leading America, I am very optimistic that they're going to do a great job. And I wanted to ask you as we sort of transition out of this, because I do want to get into what you do with Elite Sentinel. But my last question about your military career is, do you have a most memorable moment in the military?
What kind of memorable moment do you want to go for here? There's a couple.
Just like, do you have a watershed moment where you're just thinking to yourself, man, maybe it's a philosophical insight I picked up. Maybe it was just something crazy on the battlefield or an experience you had that it's so powerful, your life will never be the same after this moment.
Okay. So I'm going to go with one. It was a lesson I learned in a way I never would have expected to have learned the lesson. And the way that I learned it is, I think, something that all husbands, fathers, professionals leading teams need to consider this. I was a platoon leader, so we'd just come back from deployment. I took command of a platoon, not command, that's the wrong word, took ownership of a platoon. And we were doing a training exercise. Very long story short, it was like a platoon defense thing. And so, the enemy would like probe your line and you had to kind of defend yourself, and then you'd be evaluated on how you did. And so I love to get my hands dirty. Like I want to be in it, doing all the things, right? I'm a very hands-on, go get 'em type of guy. And again, weakness here. Well, if I'm managing a whole team, my job isn't to go do all the fighting. It's to coordinate higher level assets so we can survive, right? And so my platoon sergeant was a very experienced, I love this man. Like if he called me and needed help with anything, I would drop whatever I'm doing and go help him. He is been an incredible influence on my life. And he knew me, he knew what I was like, and he knew that the fastest way to teach me this lesson was to just let me mess it up one time. So we did. I was being way too hands-on. I was trying to do way too much, and it didn't go very well, right? And afterwards, the evaluation team was like, "Hey, this, and this that needs to improve." And I was really mad at myself. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't believe I did that. I'm so much more capable than this. I know better." I was really like beating myself up. And so then afterwards, we're kind of resetting, and it's just me and my platoon sergeant sitting in our Humvee for a second. And I was like, "Smoke, man, why didn't you like pull me back and hey, sir, I got it. Why didn't you like let me rein me in a little bit?" And he just very bluntly said, "Look, sir, I knew that if I let you F this up one time, you will never make this mistake again for the rest of your life." And here we are. It's been 13 years or 12 years since that event. And we're talking about it today. And he was right. He's absolutely right. I've never forgotten that lesson of my job, especially when you're leading a team, isn't to be the star. It's not to go do all the things yourself and show how capable you are all the time. It's to empower your team to make sure they can do their jobs to the maximum extent and do only the thing that you can do. So in this scenario, I'm the only one with the radios to contact the higher command that could move new forces to support us or call in direct fire or air support or whatever, right? My platoon sergeant and NCOs can handle the actual fighting happening around us, and I just need info from them, and then I'll push it up and get us what we need, right? And so he was right. That we did it again, and it was like the cadre like leading the thing was like, "That was unbelievable. That was so good. That's like textbook. We should have filmed that so we can teach other people." And I was like, "Okay, lesson learned." But there's two parts of that lesson. One, as a leader, your job is to empower others. But the second is, if you are in a position, maybe you're not the top guy, right? My platoon sergeant answered to me, technically. He let me learn a hard lesson the right way so that I would never forget it again and we would collectively improve. And this is a very, very, very difficult thing, especially for fathers. You can't insulate your children, or you can't even insulate your team from never making mistakes. You have to like no one was going to die, right? In this situation, it's all notional. There's no real bullets shooting. No one was actually going to get hurt. So my platoon sergeant knew this is a safe moment to learn a very painful lesson. So it'll be a little bit embarrassing, but it's going to grow, right? We're going to grow from this. That's our job as leaders, is to set conditions to safely get training scars, right? Little cuts that we remember for the rest of our life. That experience was very, very, very powerful for me. I've carried that forward. I've applied it not just to the military, but to all aspects of my life. And I hope that you can hear that story as well and apply it in your lives listening to this. So thanks, Smoke Poulet, for maybe the best lesson I've ever learned in the military.
Yeah, people like that are awesome. To have the insight in those moments and the experience, right? Like I'm sure he's, in the military, we sort of move around and you get to see a lot of different types of people. And yeah, that's just great. So Elite Sentinel Coaching, talk to me about that. How did you start that? And what is the main service you guys provide?
It really started from me kind of having a wake up moment too of, hey, I'm not really doing what I was called to do here on this earth. I had a good corporate job, paid really well, all the things, right? It should be the job that everyone wants to have. It was not aligned to who I am and what I believe I'm gifted in doing. And I had a spiritual moment where I felt God calling me saying, "Hey, this ain't the path I have for you, George." And so I reflected very heavily on that. I saw a lot of advice and mentorship from men I respect, and ultimately landed on needing to leave the corporate world and build my own business to serve people in the way that they actually need. And so the initial offer and service that I wanted to provide was men in the ways that I had struggled so much in my life. I wanted to train them to not have to deal with that, right? Or learn from my mistakes and accelerate that process. And then this ties into an interesting point here too. It comes from the book, The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. And he talks about how experience is actually the worst teacher because experience only teaches you at the cost of your life. So what if we can compress time and learn valuable lessons without the need for all of the experience? That's what I wanted to create for other men, to basically get rapid results that are very impactful on a personal level, but also generationally, right? If that man starts leading his family better, having a stronger marriage, what are the ripple effects through the generations? So that was the real passion there. And there's also another service we provide, and that's essentially executive coaching or consulting. That's very business focused, very leadership focused. I have a sales background, so I'll heavily go into working with sales teams and things like that. But essentially taking my skill sets, the things that I'm naturally passionate about and feel like I'm well equipped to do, and then providing it in a service to the right team or a group that will benefit from that, and trying to just maximize impact first and foremost. And the business model was just built as a necessary mechanism to make that mission a reality.
Cool. The type of men who seek out coaching, I'm sure it varies across, different struggles and why people are seeking coaching. But do you ever get types of men who want you to fix them? Like, hey, let me just seek out coaching, and like maybe George could just wave his magic wand and he can just fix me. Like, what's the conversation like with maybe somebody like that?
It's pretty blunt.
Okay.
So I believe that as men, we should be very direct, clear,
Mhm.
concise, and direct, especially with someone who maybe is not seeing the full picture. Because you're not being kind by just telling them a little platitude. There's no way that that guy is going to grow or heal his problem by just continuing to enable it. So for someone like that, I'll just be very transparent. Hey, man, it looks like you're expecting me to like be Jesus for you and magically fix all your problems. That's not how this works. The only way this works is if you are going to do all the effort. I will show you what to do and how to do it and guide you, but I can't walk the path for you. You have to. So if that's still of interest to you and you're willing to submit to that and to put in the effort required to fix your own life, I'm here to lock arms with you and guide you along the way. But if you're not, then we're just wasting each other's time and we need to part ways. So that comes back to this effect of, I think more men need to recognize that you can't save everybody, right? It goes back to the lesson I learned from my platoon sergeant that, you can't go convince someone, right? No one needs a coach. You have to want to coach, right? And the reason the answer there is like, if I don't coach you, it's not like you're going to die, right? Like you don't need me like air. But if you truly want me to work with you, you want to do through our program and get the results of it, then they're going to happen because your heart is already committed to reaching that goal. I can't come in there and convince you to want it. I can't make you want it. You have to want it for yourself. So that is typically how I approach those types of conversations. And it really comes down to respecting your own boundaries too. I have a family, I have other commitments, I have all these things that demand my time. And so if I try and go save every, person who is stuck in their ways, I'm going to overinvest valuable time and energy on someone who's resistant to it and ignore people who have an open hand and are saying, please help me. And so that's something we all need to reflect on. Where are you spending your time? Who are you giving your energy in your own life? Having some boundaries around that is not cruelty. That is actually kindness to the people who are most willing to receive what you can offer.
What's been more difficult, your career in the military or starting your business?
Entrepreneurship is definitely the hardest thing. It's a different kind of hard. How do I put this? In the military, you still have like a paycheck coming, and yes, it's extremely hard on the family, and there's time away and all that kind of thing. But there's still a level of structure and certainty that comes with that. That despite all of the challenges, there's still this kind of feeling of almost like a safety net. When you decide to cut all ties and build your own thing from the ground up, there is no safety net. It's all you. It hits your family a little bit differently. Your wife specifically will have a lot more fear and things like that. So there's just a whole extra set of adversity that can rise out of embarking on that. I think that's where, if someone is entertaining the idea of starting their own business, I think you need to really reflect on an individual level first. And the question you need to ask yourself is, am I really committed to doing this? It can't just be, do I want to make money? Because at some point, this thing is going to get hard. You're going to doubt yourself. There's going to be setbacks and everything. And if you're not only committed to it because you just want to make a quick buck, you're not going to succeed. For me, this was a calling first, and then the business model built to answer the calling. If you don't feel that passionate about what you want to go build, it's not going to happen. Lose motivation at some point. And so for all the aspiring entrepreneurs out there, really reflect on that. What is the thing that you actually care most about? That's why I have been able to succeed. It's not because I'm that special or have these magical, skills or whatever. It's not like I'm some awesome dude. It's just because this is something I really believed in. And so despite any difficulties, I've problem solved and surrounded myself with the people who will help me get through those. That's first and foremost, I think, the biggest priority. But it's It is, I think Elon Musk said that entrepreneurship is like staring into the, what is it? Staring into the abyss and crawling through glass daily or something like that.
Yeah,
It's
I think
like, it's like a really, really, hyperbolic statement, but yeah.
he is correct though. Like I've listened to a lot of former military guys who have started businesses, and almost every time they always say that entrepreneurship is more difficult. And Seth, what's his last name? He started Black Rifle Coffee.
Oh, I know what you're
Um,
talking about. Yeah. I
yeah,
can't think of his last name, but
he was on Joe Rogan, and they were talking about the difficulties comparing and contrasting military versus civilian life and being an entrepreneur. He's like, this is hands down way harder. It's
yeah.
different. You're saying it's different, but just like the again, and I'm only very very early in like my sort of business life. Like my brother and I, we just started a business, and we're 2 months into it, and so we haven't gone through the trenches, so to speak, yet.
Mhm.
But we're getting there, and it's shaping me, and I'm learning. Like, man, this is actually pretty hard. Last thing I want to talk about is Present Fathers podcast. Why did you start the podcast?
It was a pretty simple reason why. Me and my 3 co-hosts, we've been really close friends for a very long time. Like we have a group chat thread that's like, 15 years long at this point. This thing's been
Wow.
going on a long time. Every day, we're talking to each other. And it was during the COVID kind of nonsense and everything. We were just really frustrated with the direction that this country was going in. And, we were all busy professionals with families and all this kind of stuff. And so we're like, well, what can we really do? We have limited time and resources. What would be at least something, instead of just complaining about it, what can we do that would maybe make some level of positive impact? And so I think it was actually Justin, one of the hosts, who recommended, hey, let's do a podcast. Like, we can just figure that out. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I don't know why we didn't think of that sooner. And so we just started, and really we just wanted to create a space for fathers to get valuable inputs and advice and kind of learn from others' stories and experiences, and hopefully figure out how to be a better dad. Because we felt that if you focus on men first and help them raise their families stronger, it kind of makes a societal impact down the line anyway. Kind of a bottom up grassroots movement. And, we had no aspirations of any metrics or anything. We were just like, hey, we'll just do our best, get a little bit better each time. And if we can help even just one dad raise a stronger family, then mission accomplished, So it was very, very humble beginnings, but the mission was very pure. And yeah, we've been blessed to have had incredible guests, yourself included, just now over 3 seasons. And it has been an incredible journey. But I think there is a real hunger, right? I think a lot of guys are finally realizing that trying to figure all this stuff out on your own is not a winning strategy. It is not an equation for success. And so I think that's why we've done pretty well. Is most people want to help fathers be better fathers, right? It's a pretty easy thing to want to support and get behind, even if we have disagreements. And so, yeah, it's been a little bit of its own kind of growth journey and experience, but we're just 4 regular guys trying to help other regular guys out there figure it out. And we don't claim to be the experts of anything, but just creating those conversations so that we can actually get valuable lessons. And I attribute much of my own growth in the last couple of years and my success as an entrepreneur to just the lessons we've learned from our guests. I mean, it's just every week is a masterclass from someone who's really good at something, and there's always a valuable thing to learn from each and every one of them. So if you haven't checked it out yet, highly recommend it. If you're a dad or an aspiring dad, actually, that's the best market to listen to it, is if you're not a dad yet and want to be one. It's best to learn this stuff beforehand, I assure you. But yeah, that's really all it is. And we'll keep going until we can't.
Yeah. No, it's an incredible podcast, and you guys do a great job. And I think you guys have had growth. I've been watching your guys' views and subscriber count. Like you guys are steadily growing. I think that's for a reason. I think you hit the nail on the head that people are searching for knowledge. They're searching for experience and just something with a little bit more of a deeper meaning and authenticity. Last question, and I promise I'll be done. How do you manage your time on the internet? As a father and a husband, lend some perspective. What do you do personally to not become terminally online?
It's a great question. And I think it's a problem everyone has to answer today, not just men, not just fathers. I try to essentially create boundaries around it where it's almost like a scheduled thing. So, my business relies heavily on being on social media, right? That's how I do a lot of my marketing and, get my name out there and that kind of stuff is being online. So just treating it as more of like a task that has to be done as opposed to doom scrolling incessantly. So, devise your thing, post your thing, and then let it go. It's just a post. It doesn't actually mean anything in the grand scheme of life. So when you're not working or not doing, your social media time, leave the phone in the other room, put it down, focus on where you are. There's like a country song, like be where your boots are. It's actually a really good kind of philosophy is, hey, wherever you are right now, just be present in that moment. And that's what I focus on doing. And so if it's not, urgent, stressful, whatever, this thing, I just put it away and leave it away. And I'm not perfect at, your social media, all the things on your phone, it's designed to hack your brain to make you want to continue to use it. So you got to kind of recognize it for what it is and, kind of put it off in its own little corner. But, for some people, they put time on their calendar for it. There's like little things you can get like lock boxes or Faraday cage type things where it literally won't let you open it once you've done it. I use like the sleep mode thing on my phone to where after certain hours, it mutes notifications and that kind of stuff. And it can be a very powerful tool. We're only having this podcast right now because of technology and the ability to, to speak in real time across the entire country. So it's not like it's all evil or bad, but if you let it rule your life, then now it is a problem. So that's my personal strategies, and it ties back to my bigger goals and aspirations and what I value, right? I value having deep family connection more than I value likes on Instagram or whatever, So reframe it, make it a game for yourself almost of putting it into perspective like that. That for me, that has helped to kind of recognize like, hey, this actually doesn't get me what I want. My real objective is this. So this is just a function of my business getting to that point.
Man, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope people listening, glean off some of the insights. And I'll make sure to put links to, some of your coaching, because you don't have to be in person to receive coaching or, to listen to your podcast even. So people should know who you are and follow what you do. And I'm the better for it. So just want to thank you for your time today, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. A really, really good conversation. And I'm excited to see your journey grow as well now that you've kind of forged a new path.
Thank you, man. We'll stay in touch. See ya.
Absolutely.